What's up guys, Strypz here. Welcome to the channel and thank you for stopping by to check out a brand new video. So it has been quite a while since I've sat down and recorded a video, but it feels so good to be back in front of the camera recording a new video for you guys. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you all so much for watching. Everybody who was stuck by my side, even though I have not been uploading, you guys mean the world to me, and I appreciate you all so very much. So what are we doing today? I thought it was about time to do another Furrified review. For those who don't know what Furrified reviews are, it is where I review films in a fursuit so that, one, I can introduce people who know nothing about the furry fandom to the furry fandom, but two, so that I can help show furries that it is okay to talk about other interests besides just the furry fandom. And it also is a way to talk about the films and TV shows that I like from both a technical standpoint as a filmmaker, but also from an audience standpoint, so that you can get a review of the movie. Now that you know what the Furrified reviews are, what are we talking about today? Today we are talking about Tick, Tick, Boom, the new movie that just premiered on Netflix about a week ago. And part of the reason I'm making this review is because I was inspired by Wait in the Wings, but also by the film itself. We're going to break down this movie entirely. So, you know, if you want a spoiler-free review of the film, go over to Netflix, watch it, and then come back here so that you can see the review of the film. Or, you know, if you want the entire movie spoiled for you, continue watching. Either which way, we're going to get into this film. Before we get into the review of the film, I do want to go over the background and history of the film. So for those who don't know, Tick, Tick, Boom is a semi-autobiographical story of Johnathan Larson's life. Johnathan Larson is the composer and the playwright behind one of the most famous musicals of all time, Rent. This movie is a reimagining, or not even a reimagining, but a reworking for the silver screen of a Broadway play that he wrote called Boho Days. Boho Days eventually got, retitled into Tick, Tick, Boom, but Johnathan Larson wrote Boho Days, aka Tick, Tick, Boom, right before he wrote Rent, but just after he wrote Superbia. So Superbia was what he thought was going to be his launching point, his jump off point. And Tick, Tick, Boom is essentially the story of him in his final days of writing Superbia and trying to come up with the final song for Superbia and put on a workshop and hopefully get investors to premiere this production on either off-Broadway or on Broadway. So it is a very interesting film, and it's one that when you try to explain it, it's like you sit there and you scratch your head, you're like, what? But the long and short of it is you're following the life of Johnathan Larson, essentially the life of an artist. Now, this film stars Andrew Garfield, who most people know as Spider-Man, but in this role he is playing Johnathan Larson. Then you have Alexandra Shipp, who plays Susan, who is Johnathan Larson's love interest in this film. Susan, from what we know, was not a real person, but may have been a hodgepodge of a couple of people that Johnathan actually knew and may have taken notes from Johnathan Larson's actual girlfriend, but this is not his actual girlfriend. Then you have Robin de Jesus, who plays Michael, who is one of Johnathan Larson's best friends. Again, this is based off of a real person. As far as we know, there was not an actual person named Michael. Then you have Vanessa Hudgens of High School Musical fame playing Caressa. And then rounding out our main cast is Joshua Henry, who plays Roger. Now, most people would just stop there, but since this is also from a filmmaker standpoint, I do want to highlight the director of photography, the editors, but also the person who adapted the script for the big screen. So first off, we have the director, who is Lin-Manuel Miranda. Then you have the director of photography, Alice Brooks. She did a phenomenal job from a cinematography standpoint. And again, we're going to get more into that as we get into the review. Then you have the editors, who were Myron Kirstein and Andrew Weisblum. Again, these editors blew my mind. There's one sequence in particular that stands out, which, again, we will get into. And finally, this was adapted off of Boho Days, but rewritten by Stephen Levinson for the silver screen. So, usually when Boho Days was performed, aka Tick Tick Boom, it was essentially a rock monologue where Johnathan Larson would get up there with his self, a piano, and a small group of musicians, and he would perform these songs back to back with monologues interspersed that, told this story. But you can't really do that and make a compelling film. So what they did was they took this play and they found a way to write it for the silver screen, and I think they did an absolutely phenomenal job, because musicals are one of the hardest movies to produce, because you have to make the songs feel natural. In a theater environment, of course, characters can just break out into song, but when you're watching a movie that is supposed to be grounded in reality, for characters to just burst into song randomly, it is very jarring, and so there has to be a reason for these songs to exist. But that is a perfect segue into getting into the actual review of the film. So the film starts out with what I originally thought was archival footage. Now, on a second rewatch, I realized this was not archival footage, and this was the director, editor, and cinematographer having a fun time, but also trying to be really authentic to the legacy and memory of Johnathan Larson. Johnathan Larson did have a friend who would follow him around with a camcorder, and the way this film starts is with what looks like actual footage of Johnathan Larson. It's not. It's a footage of Andrew Garfield playing Johnathan Larson, but the editors took the cinematic footage and compressed it into a 4:3 aspect ratio and added some degradation to it to make it actually look like, late 1980, early 1990 camcorder footage. So we're already starting out on a high note from the technical side of things, and I already knew that I was in for a treat when I saw that and realized what was actually going on. Then that 4:3 footage transfers into our standard, widescreen, high quality, high definition footage of Johnathan Larson on stage playing the piano, and that is our wraparound piece. And I really liked how the directors and the director of photography came together and the writer came together to tell this story, but make it still feel cohesive. They still wanted to introduce you to the fact that this is Johnathan putting on a play, but they still wanted us to see what happened behind the scenes, showing the story visually instead of it just being told through song. So when I mentioned the term wraparound piece, it reminds me so much of the first film that I reviewed here, which was All the Creatures Were Stirring, which was a horror anthology film, but it still needed something to tie all of the pieces together. And that is, again, what this film needed. Because, as I mentioned at the beginning, making a movie musical is very difficult, and so you need a way to get in and out of your songs in a way that makes sense. So by having Johnathan be introduced on stage, performing Tick Tick Boom, and then using the camera to cut away and show what is going on, I think was done phenomenally well. Like I said, the archival footage transfers into the high quality footage, and that first bit of high quality footage is the very first song, 3090. Now, 3090 was where I knew this film was going to be special, because it resonated with me in such a big way. So I went into this musical blind, because Tick Tick Boom got a very limited off-Broadway run, and then even afterwards, it never fully made its way to Broadway, and so nobody really knew about Tick Tick Boom unless you were like in that underground musical scene, and or you really dive deep into Johnathan Larson's life. Most people know Johnathan Larson because of Rent. So this is my first time ever hearing the song 3090, which is literally about an artist, Johnathan Larson, about to turn 30 in 1990.
They're singing happy birthday, you just want to lay down and cry.
Now, the reason that resonated with me so much is because here I am, I just turned 28, and I'm an artist, and I'm just like, I understand where you're coming from. Like, because one of the things that the lyrics of this song are trying to drive home, and something that gets brought up a little bit later in the film, is that by 30 years old, we as people are supposed to have something to show for it, something to prove, especially if you're an artist. You feel like you have not made it, and that you're not ever going to be successful, that if by 30 years old, you don't have have recognition. And as an artist, that is the hardest thing to swallow, is realizing that, hey, you know, it's okay to not have made it by 30. It does not invalidate what you have done and what you are doing. And for me, it was so poignant, because literally like a week or a week and a half before I watched this film, I had a complete emotional breakdown because of where I was as an artist. I again was thinking about the fact that I just turned 28. I'm 2 years away from 30. I've been doing photography, videography, and DJing for 14 years. And what do I have to show for it? And so watching this film, and then also, you know, watching Wait in the Wings video, one, inspired me to make this video, but secondly, helped me realize that even if I haven't made it by 30, I gotta keep pushing, and that it's going to be okay. So 3090 leads us into a scene that takes place in the Moondance Diner. So as he's singing 3090, the camera cuts away from him singing on stage, and that's when we start getting introduced to our other characters, who are Michael and Susan, so his best friend and his girlfriend. And again, the film did a phenomenal job with cutting in between the music to tell the story, but also letting the song play out. And the very first scene that we get that's not on stage with Johnathan Larson singing is in the Moondance Diner. Now, one of the things that the filmmakers had to do, which is absolutely incredible, is essentially rebuilt this diner from the ground up, because the Moondance Diner was a real place in New York that a lot of aspiring directors, writers, producers, you know, dancers, musicians, like if you were trying to work in the arts in New York, a lot of people worked at the Moondance Diner until they were able to, you know, make their dream. Unfortunately, in 2012, it was shut down, and I think subsequently either torn down or completely remodeled, so it no longer looks like the original Moondance Diner. What the crew did was rebuild the Moondance Diner for this film, and so I cannot even imagine how it must have felt to look on such an iconic and historic place, rebuilt from scratch, to, you know, tell Johnathan Larson's really his life story. Like I said, this is a semi-autobiographical film. from there, we are introduced to these characters, and we start getting into the real meat and the real conflict of the story, because films have to have conflict. Any type of story has to have conflict, and the main conflict of this film is time. And I know this sounds kind of ambiguous, but as we already discussed, Johnathan is 29 and is about to turn 30 and is struggling with his place as an artist. And as the film goes on, we start seeing that he is neglecting spending time with his best friend and his girlfriend because he's so focused on his art. But then you also find out through the film that he doesn't have much time to spend with them either, and so that is our main conflict, is time. But I also really like how the filmmakers utilize Chekhov's gun. And if you don't know, that is a technique in film where if you show something on screen, it has to be used. It needs to come back up later on in the film. And within this sequence with 3090, when you are introduced to the girlfriend Susan, Johnathan shows her this composition book that he wants, but he couldn't afford to buy it. So now that you've been introduced to all the characters, we start really getting into the story aspect of the story. And we've already finished the first song, and we are meeting up with Johnathan in his apartment. And at the current moment, Michael is still living with him, but Michael is getting ready to move out, and you get all of this through the expositional dialogue. But this is where the filmmakers do something really cool and throw in a couple of nods to Rent, which was, again, Johnathan Larson's the piece that made him famous, that he unfortunately never got to see come to fruition. When Michael listens to the answering machine, the last thing you hear on that machine is the speakers won't work. And that is an allusion to a scene in Rent where Joanne calls up Mark and asking for help to repair the speakers because she can't get a hold of Maureen, and that leads into one of my favorite songs from Rent, which is The Tango Maureen. So I thought that was a really, really cool hint, hint, nudge, nudge, wink, wink that the filmmakers threw in there for anybody who is a fan of Rent. And then a little bit later on in the film, you hear his answering machine again, and it does the speak thing that you hear all throughout Rent. So the little hints and nods to Rent made this film very special, and you could really tell that it was a love letter to Johnathan Larson while simultaneously telling his story. Then the other thing that is introduced is another Chekhov's gun, which is you see as Johnathan Larson is going through his day-to-day life, he will see something that inspires him, and he'll write a quick note down, and you'll see that note appear on the screen, and that all leads up to something that I'm not going to spoil quite yet. The other thing the filmmakers did really well, which I've been harping on, is making the songs flow and making the songs fit. And that leads us into the next song, which is Boho Days. Now, Boho Days comes after the preparation for this party. They go to Jonathan's girlfriend's dance recital because she is a dancer, and then afterwards they throw her a party to celebrate her, and also because Jonathan's birthday is coming up, and the fact that he's about to try to put on his first showing of Superbia and an attempt to get investors. So he's throwing this party to not only celebrate his girlfriend, but also what he thinks is about to be the launch of his career. And as the party starts to wind down, Johnathan launches into Boho Days.
This is the life of Bohemia.
Which is, again, paying homage to the original name of the show. And you can see him just off the top of his head start coming up with the lyrics of this song to try to get the party re-engaged, to get them re-excited. But it is also a very interesting song because it shows the way that John's mind works and leads to the secondary conflict of the film, which is the fact that he needs one more song for Superbia that he needs that one more song in Act 2 to really tie this musical that he's written together. But he is struggling, and he's struggling so much to come up with this one final song. So seeing how Boho Days is performed, it's like, okay, this guy's a genius. Why can't he write this one song? So from there, we get into more of that central conflict of time, because Jonathan's girlfriend comes up and tells him, hey, my dance career isn't really taking off, but in order to continue to survive here in New York, I'm going to take a job at this dance school. It's a full-time job, and John doesn't really want to leave New York because that's where he knows his dream is going to come true. But at the same time, he doesn't want to leave his girlfriend, so it becomes another conflict within the film that comes to a head a little bit later on. So again, the filmmakers are laying this groundwork. So from there, we get into the next song, because that is essentially how this movie progresses. Just like a regular musical is, you have dialogue, and then that launches into a song, and so you get into No More. Now, No More has to be one of my favorite pieces in this film. And this film is full of absolutely amazing songs. It is full of some incredible dialogue. But this song, the way it was filmed, the way it was edited, it was like the director just looked at his director of photography and his editors and were just like, have fun. Just have fun. Make this feel like a big Broadway musical number. And that's exactly what they did in No More.
No more walking up 6 flights of stairs or throwing down the key because there is no buzzer.
They did some really, really cool things, because this is a song about Michael leaving the lower slums of New York because he's taken a job with this advertising agency, and they are paying him, a big salary, and so he's able to move into a really, really nice apartment. And this is a song about him and Johnathan going to, see this apartment, and about him moving into this apartment. The color grading when they are talking about the old apartment versus the new apartment, in the color grade, they completely desaturate it, besides this little pop of reds and blues to really emphasize the griminess of this old place. But then when they get to the new place, it is the vibrancy. It seems to be kicked up a notch, and it's so beautiful. Now, the only qualms that I had with this scene from a filmmaking standpoint was there was this one particular moment where you could see that they were filming on a green screen. This is something that I noticed because I am a filmmaker, but most people, it's gonna a moment that's gonna go right past them. It does not change the scene. It's just something that I noticed that took me out of the moment slightly, but didn't completely remove me from what was going on. And then the other thing, and this was something that I noticed throughout the entire film, when they were doing certain like really high energy, high action songs, you could tell that they were lip syncing on set. Now, again, this is something that if you're a musician or you're a filmmaker, it's something that you may notice, but it's not something that will completely take you out of the moment in the film. But I can also understand why that was a creative choice that was made, because, singing, it takes a lot of energy, takes a lot of time, and, you have to do multiple takes when you film. So running your actors over and over and over and having them sing at full volume, it's completely understandable why they had them lip sync on set, besides with a track like Boho, which is an entirely a cappella track. And then finally, we get into the editing. Now, the editing in this was so cool. They pulled out all of the cool editing tricks with some reveal cuts, whip cuts, and match cuts. All types of cuts that I love to see. And the way the way they bookend this song is with a match cut from the elevator doors closing to some subway doors closing, and it is so well done, and I absolutely applaud them on how they executed that scene. Now from there, we are introduced to two more very important characters who are Ira Wiseman and the one, the only, the legendary Stephen Sondheim. Now, Ira Wiseman was a real person that Johnathan Larson worked with, and he was the first person to really believe in Johnathan and really give him that opportunity and that drive to work his craft. Now, at this point, Johnathan has been working on Superbia for 8 years. Again, it resonates with me. Like I said earlier, I've been doing what I've been doing for 14 years and still haven't gotten my big break. So, I can't even imagine how he felt as a playwright after 8 years, getting ready to mount this first workshop production, try to get investors. But this is also where that conflict that I was talking about earlier, him trying to write this song, comes up. Because Ira Wiseman tells him, hey, you need one more song for the second act. And that is where you get into a scene where we get a flashback to Johnathan working on Superbia in this workshop. Stephen Sondheim sat in on this workshop, and Stephen Sondheim and the director of the workshop start getting into this banter back and forth, where the director of the workshop essentially starts trying to brown nose Stephen Sondheim. And it is an absolutely hilarious scene.
The problem is it's not particularly easy to follow the emotional thread. The details distract us from connecting with the characters. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yes, we're on the same page. That's exactly how I felt. We're saying the same thing, just differently. But the music, okay? I'm sorry, the music just wasn't there.
I thought the songs were swell.
Yeah, okay, yes, the individual song.
And if I was in that guy's position, I probably would have done the same thing, because I absolutely adore Stephen Sondheim. He wrote my favorite musical of all time, Sweeney Todd. So, I definitely can understand why Johnathan Larson was so inspired by Sondheim, because Sondheim wrote some of the most incredible scores and wrote some of the most incredible musicals, and you get to see that in a little bit later on, because Johnathan wrote this song called Sunday, which they do perform in the movie, which again paid homage to Stephen Sondheim and his play Sunday in the Park with George. The other really interesting thing about the interaction that Sondheim has with Johnathan Larson is that it serves a dual purpose, because it helps to explain how musicals work. After you've had this conflict, you need the awakening moment, and that's the song that Johnathan needs to write. He needs the song that is going to knock the protagonist into high gear and have him come out on top. And it's very interesting, because the point that this song appears in the actual movie is in the second act arc, just like it would be, and it serves the exact same purpose. And I think it is beautifully done, that the movie is following the exact same structure that an actual musical would follow, and that the song comes in the same spot, and it does the same thing that it would in the play that he wrote. From there, we get another good nod to Stephen Sondheim, where Michael and Susan and John are all sitting and actually watching Sunday in the Park with George, like, on PBS. And then we get into another not gut-wrenching song, but another song that, as an artist, you feel this in your soul, and that is Johnny Can't Decide.
Johnny has no guide. Johnny wants to hide.
Again, shot beautifully. Like, the cinematography really works very well in this scene. So from there, we get into something that Johnathan touched on a lot in his work, and that was the AIDS epidemic, because in the late 80s, early 90s, AIDS was running rampant, and he had a lot of friends who were actors who, who unfortunately had AIDS, and he watched pass away over and over. And the way that is introduced within Tick, Tick, Boom is his friend Freddie, who was in attendance to Susan's party. We found out in the party scene that he had AIDS, and now Freddie is in the hospital. And that leads into Sunday, which is Johnathan grappling with the fact that, hey, I want to go see my friend, but at the same time, I can't leave my job because it is a Sunday afternoon, and this is where all the crowd rush comes in. Something really cool that the filmmakers did is that they were able to get a bunch of Broadway stars to cameo within this number, which was it was so cool to see people that you've seen on Broadway appear in this musical in a very Broadway-esque number.
Sunday for a cool orange juice or a bagel.
And this whole song takes place in the Moondance Diner. And just to think that some of these people back in the day probably either worked at the Moondance Diner or ate there quite a bit. So it's a very, very fun, very cool number. Again, impeccably filmed. It feels very Broadway on the silver screen, and I absolutely love it. Now, from there, we go into the next portion, which is Johnathan doing the initial workshop that leads up to the final workshop of Superbia. Now, we get this really fun song called Play Game, which is a rap song that Johnathan wrote, but the way it is presented in the movie is like an late 80s, early 90s music video. It is absolutely hilarious. And not in like a ha-ha funny way, but in this is a really interesting way of seeing, different types of art form come to the screen.
Walk through Times Square and what do you see? Ugliness where architecture used to be.
They end capped it with a phenomenal joke because the song is not performed by Johnathan, even though they do cut to a quote-unquote archival piece of footage of Johnathan performing this song, but it's performed by somebody else, and the person who performs it encaps the scene because they're sitting there auditioning to play Old Deuteronomy and Cats, which is a complete juxtaposition of a rapper, and it was so well done, filmed phenomenally. It looked like a late 80s, early 90s music video, and it was an absolute blast. So from there, we get into him working on Superbia, and this entire arc is kind of what you would consider a montage of Johnathan getting this workshop up and ready while simultaneously still not having the second act song ready. But you see him continuing to ignore his girlfriend, continuing to ignore his best friend, doing whatever he can to get money together because he needed more band members, and all Ira was able to offer him was just a pianist. And so you see him, selling records and doing what he can to make money just so that he can put on this initial performance for investors the best way he can. And what we're seeing is the rehearsal process and the musicians learning the music for this final presentation to potential investors. It's done very well. It is most of the time I cannot stand montage sequences in movies, but this one was done very, very well. You couldn't tell that it was a montage sequence, and then you get another little nudge joke in there because Johnathan, when he sells his record collection, decides to keep Godspell, and the cashier makes a joke about Day by Day, which is the name of one of the songs in Godspell. Again, the little in jokes that the director put in there for musical theater nerds is great. From there, we get into probably the most relatable song in the entire musical, which is Therapy, because all of us have had a fight with a significant other, and this is literally a song about that internal dialogue, that internal monologue that you have going on in your head that you don't quite know how to voice, but it's intercut with the actual argument. And again, you could tell that the filmmakers had fun.
I was afraid that you'd be afraid if I told you that I was afraid of intimacy.
I've been telling you how unhappy I am for months.
If you don't have a problem with my problem, maybe the problem's simply codependency. Everyone's unhappy in New York. That's what New York is.
They had so much fun putting this scene together. At this point, Susan breaks up with Johnathan because he has not given her an answer about whether or not she should take the job, and she feels like that he is not paying her enough attention, and so she breaks off the relationship. Everything is starting to go downhill for John, but he also needs more money to get a couple of more musicians for the performance. That is where we start getting into conflict with Michael, because Michael had called him and told him about this focus group. The only reason that Johnathan goes is because the focus group is going to pay him some money. Michael also realizes that Johnathan is over in La La Land focusing on this musical and can't hear the struggle in Michael's voice. The focus group, again, is a beautiful illusion, and it also kind of acts as a reprise to No More, because this is Jonathan's moment of being like, hey, well, maybe I could stop being a writer, and maybe I could, go into marketing and actually get paid for my creativity and my talent. And I think all of us as artists have been there, where if we had an opportunity to sell out, we seriously think about it for a second, but then we realize how bad it would be to sell out. And I think that this focus group scene pinpoints that perfectly with how it ends. This is one of the few things I don't want to spoil, because it is absolutely hilarious what this focus group is trying to come up with and how funny Johnathan Larson is. And from there, we again get into more conflict between Michael and John, because John did something in the focus group that could reflect badly on Michael, and Michael's like, this is my career. He's like, you are working towards becoming an artist. I chose to go a different path. And you see them get into this argument, but you can also see that there's something deeper going on with Michael, but we don't quite know what that is yet. And you can see how broken Johnathan is, because at this point, his girlfriend's broken up with him. He feels like he just lost his best friend because he screwed up this opportunity that his best friend gave him. And then he gets back to his apartment. He has a call from his agent, who hasn't talked to him in a year. His agent is like, hey, I was able to get a bunch of people together to come to the show tomorrow night, and hopefully they will invest in your production. And then that kicks Johnathan in the butt to, I'm going to write this song. And as he sits down to write this song, his lights go out. So everything is crashing down around him. But it leads to the song Swimming, which is where John is like, you know what? I need to get away. Everything is going absolutely insane, and I just need to take my mind off stuff. And he goes swimming, and that is the point that he gets the inspiration for the song that is going to end up being the the quintessential song of not only this musical, but the musical Superbia. Again, the cinematographers had so much fun with this because it's literally just Andrew Garfield swimming back and forth in this pool as he's singing this song. But at the end, they got their effects crew to do this really cool thing where he stops over the number 30, which is the age he's about to turn. And it's just like in that instant, it just clicks and the song comes to him. And you literally, the way that they designed the pool in this scene looked exactly like the paper that you write on when you're writing out music. It looked like sheet music paper. And so they use that to their advantage. You can see the notes appear, and you can see that spark, that idea hit him. He goes home, he writes the song, and then that leads us to the next day, which is where he's actually putting on the production for investors and friends and family and producers. And that's where we get to meet his parents. You see that Michael wasn't as angry as him as he originally thought, because Michael does show up to the performance, even though Susan doesn't. And you see this performance, starting to go off without a hitch. Everybody's loving it. And finally, we get to that second act song, the crux of the show, the crux of the movie, which is the song Come to Your Senses.
Come to your senses, defenses are not the way to go, and you know, or at least you knew.
Come to Your Senses is an absolutely amazing track because there's so much subtext in there. There's subtext of what is actually happening in the musical Superbia, but it is essentially a song that he wrote to himself to wake himself up. And there's a line in the film where he's like, in that moment, I didn't see Vanessa Hudgens' character, whose name I can't remember right now. He's like, I didn't see her. All I saw was Susan. And that's when he realized, oh crap, I messed up. I messed up big time. And so, again, just like Sondheim explained to him, you need to have that come to Jesus moment. This was his quote unquote come to Jesus moment where he realized I messed up and I need to right my wrongs. At this point is where we start really getting into the heavy emotional side of this film. And that is where he's on high because the show went off really well. Sondheim was in attendance to this. He's thinking he's gonna get investors right away. He goes back to his apartment. Rosa calls him and was just like, hey, it was absolutely wonderful. It was great. All the producers love it. This, that, and third. And John is like, okay, so when is somebody going to pick it up? And she's just like, they're waiting for the next one. And you can just see the absolute defeat in his face. Because after 8 years of working on this, after rave reviews, people still do not want to pick this up for an either off-Broadway or on-Broadway performance. Because on Broadway, the producers think that nobody is going to spend the money to see this, and then off-Broadway, it would be too expensive to actually put on this show. As an artist who's faced rejection, and I oh my gosh, I feel the scene in my heart, because it's like, oh, I poured my heart and soul into this, and nobody wants to nobody cares. Like, people care. People are saying it's good, but it's not what we want. And so I feel Johnathan at the bottom of my heart in this. But that leads us to where everything starts coming together to really start rounding out the end of the film, and where you start getting all the storylines come together. And that is where Johnathan goes to Michael's office, and it's just like, hey, Michael, I'm done trying to be a writer. I am done trying to be an artist. You know what? I'm just going to go into marketing just like you. I won't make jokes anymore. Like, I'm just going to be rich because of my job, not because I'm pursuing my passion. And Michael tells him, he's like, no, you are special. What you do, what you've created is amazing. It's special. You cannot give up on your dream. And John is insistent, like, no, I'm done. And that's when Michael drops the bombshell on him that he also has AIDS. Oh my gosh, it was so gut-wrenching to watch. And that's the moment that Johnathan realizes, he's just like, you tried to tell me this earlier, but I was so wrapped up in trying to write my story and trying to write this song that I completely forgot about you, and I was not a good friend. Michael has to get back to work, and Johnathan goes running through the park, and that leads to the song Why. And Why is such a powerful song, because that is a song where John is just like, you know what, I cannot give up on being an artist. I cannot give up my dreams. I cannot give up on my hopes, because I've wanted this since I was a kid. And I think as an artist, we have all had that moment where it's like, I'm going to quit, I'm going to give up, but then we have something that kicks us in the butt and that makes us keep pursuing our dreams and keeps pursuing our goals. And again, the filmmakers did a phenomenal job with some of their camera work, some of their camera moves, and really crafting this story through the visuals. Then we finally get to the resolution of the film, which is where Sondheim messages him, and Sondheim was just like, you know what? It was absolutely amazing. Don't give up, kid. You should be proud. But I'm going to backtrack a little bit, because one of the things that Rosa said when he was on the phone with her was, Rosa was just like, for the next one, write what you know. And to keep writing. Like, she's like, even though producers don't want to pick this one up, keep writing and write what you know. And that is what led to the writing of Boho Days, aka Tick Tick Boom, what we are currently watching. Like, so it's kind of like seeing the story within the story, and it's really, really cool if you know the history of the show. And so we are currently watching Tick Tick Boom while watching, we're watching the creation of Tick Tick Boom while watching Tick Tick Boom, while simultaneously watching Tick Tick Boom, because the show that we're watching Johnathan perform in the movie is Tick Tick Boom. So it's very Inception-esque, and it's really cool. From there, we go into the next scene, which is after the workshop. Everybody goes back to the diner. You see them celebrating. You also see Susan show up, and even though she doesn't attend the party because they're broken up, she still thinks about John. She still cares about John, and gets him a composition notebook, the one that we saw at the very beginning of the film. And so that's Chekhov's gun. And so all those plot lines get wrapped up nicely. And then we get a really emotional moment where we get a voiceover that talks about how that led him to write Tick Tick Boom, which led him to write Rent, and then Rent got picked up, and then right before the performance, the night that the very first performance of Rent was supposed to happen off Broadway, unfortunately, Johnathan Larson passed away of a heart condition and never got to see his vision come to life. But it went on to be a cultural phenomenon that everybody knows. So, you know, Johnathan, he may not have made it at 30, but at 35, he wrote a musical that would span generations upon generations of people and would go to be such a powerful, amazing voice. But that leads us to the very last song of the film, which is Louder Than Words, which is the payoff of, you know, the Chekhov gun that we saw at the beginning of the film, of all the words appearing on screen as Johnathan was writing stuff down. And these ended up being the lyrics to the song Louder Than Words.
Cages or wings, which do you prefer? Ask the birds.
And it is, again, such an emotional, gut-wrenching track. And you see his friends there. You see that Freddy got better. You see Michael in the audience. You see that he's still reserving a spot for Susan. And even though she didn't sit in the seat, they pan and you can see her at the back of the auditorium. So even though they're no longer dating, she's still supporting him. She just isn't showing, in the front row supporting him, but she's still there. And it is just such a phenomenal end cap to the film. As the last notes of Louder Than Words play, as it's playing, you see them celebrating Jonathan's 30th birthday. You see him blowing out the candles, and then from there we go into the credit sequence. His actual archival footage of Johnathan Larson, and that's where the film ends. And like I said, as an artist, this film resonates with me so much. It is oh my gosh, it's hard to put into words how much this film resonated with me, especially, like I mentioned earlier, having just turned 28, staring down my 30th birthday, and having pursued my art for 14 years. I see so much of myself in Johnathan, and I know what it's like to want to give up on that art. And so this movie, I love it. I think you guys should 100% check it out. I know I spoiled the whole thing because we were talking about it from a technical aspect as well as from an audience aspect, but I 100% think that you guys should check this movie out, especially if you love musicals. For me, I'm a huge musical theater nerd. I actually, in high school, attended a specialized high school for the performing arts and was participating in musicals all 4 years of high school. So for me, this is a big thumbs up in my book, and it gets a 4 out of 5 paw rating, because as we have here on the Furrified reviews, we do give every movie a paw rating, and I will give this 4 out of 5 paws, and that is only because there was a couple of technical aspects that I couldn't overlook, but all in all, as a story, I think that they did a phenomenal job adapting Johnathan Larson's original work into something that could be shown on the screen. I think that the editors did a phenomenal job. I think that the cinematography was beautiful. It was a very cohesive story, and it was a very poignant and impactful story, and they were able to actually pull off a musical on the silver screen and have it feel very natural, especially with it not being your traditional Broadway musical. So for all those reasons, 4 out of 5 paws. Phenomenal job, guys. And thank you so much to Johnathan Larson for not giving up on his dreams. Thank you for waiting the wings, for inspiring me to finally sit down and record again. And thank you guys so much for watching this review. I appreciate y'all so much. If you enjoyed this, give it a nice big thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And if you want to see more of this, hit that subscribe button, as well as a little bell notification icon right next to it, so you'll be notified when I upload new videos. And then finally, leave a comment down below. But yeah, I appreciate you guys so much. My name has been Strypz. This has been another Furrified review, and you guys are absolutely awesome. Keep rocking on and being awesome. Peace.